Hello and welcome. I'm Chris Braitch, and this is the Seen and Heard podcast, a conversational series. I am an emotional health and leadership coach and co-founder of the not-for-profit Seen and Heard, which supports those seeking healing, connection, and systemic change. My vision is to move myself and the world around me towards connection and compassion. And each week, I will connect with amazing guests who are on their journey to bring about meaningful change in their own lives and the world around them. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to the Seen and Heard podcast, a conversational series. I'm delighted today to be joined by David Busch. David has worked in children's homes as a clinical social worker, therapist, and a couples counsellor, and is the founder and developer behind Serum, a self-help audio system designed to help people process emotional trauma and stress. Serum stands for Self-Effective Rapid Eye Movement, and it is described as an advanced self-administered version of EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Combining elements of hypnosis, mindfulness, inner child work, music therapy, and what David and the creators call awe therapy, which we'll find out more about later. According to his work, Serum allows a listener to enter a brain state akin to REM sleep, while awake, enabling them to reprocess traumatic memories, negative emotions lodged in the amygdala, and unresolved distress in the privacy of their own space. Over the years, the approach has attracted both praise, and testimonials from users who've experienced great emotional release, relief of anxiety, deeper processing, but also some scrutiny, questions about the scientific evidence, limitations, and safe boundaries of self-therapy, all of which we'll get into today. So we'll explore both the theory and practice behind Serum, the inspiration and challenges in its development, and how users might engage with it safely. And also it's how it fits, doesn't within established therapeutic modalities. So welcome, David Busch.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being interviewed.
No, it's great. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while, and then you were very patient with me over the summer when we had to reschedule. So thank you. And we reflected just before we started recording that we met through Dr. Naomi Murphy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, wonderful clinical psychologist here in England who's been very supportive of Seen and Heard and all that we've done. So thank you, Naomi, and great to put us together. So let's jump into it today. And what I'd love to do at the start of all of our podcasts is to get a sense of who you are, where you came from, and how things were for you in the early years to shape you into the work that you now do. So yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about your early years, that would be great.
Raised in the Midwest in the United States, the second born of 4 kids. And, when I think of my trajectory in life, a big important moment for me was when my wife and I, just graduating undergraduate school, applied to be house parents in a boys' home. And so we lived on a farm, and we were in charge of 21 pre-delinquent boys. And we did that for 2 years. It was kind of a signature experience in my life because it was very emotional, and realized that it was that kind of work that we wanted to do. And so that's what made us decide to go to graduate school and get our MSW degrees. And, after that, we went into private practice eventually and did that for 40 years in a state called Arizona in the Southwest United States.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, when you mentioned boys' home, obviously the Seen and Heard side of things is boarding schools here in the UK, all over the world. We support people who've been through the boarding school system, amongst others. And yes, it's quite a unique experience growing up in a home that isn't your own, whether it be state care, foster care, boarding schools, or this boys' home. I'd love to talk a little bit more about that. And also lovely to hear that you mentioned your wife. So you've obviously been on quite a journey together, professionally and personally.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, it's like practicing being parents with the very difficult youth. And we got very, very close to those kids. After 2 years, we actually cried when we left to go to graduate school because we really loved them. We did the best we could with them. It was probably a different experience than it is in the UK, where there's probably more of a staff. But basically, we lived with these kids like a family for, it was like 21 boys. So it was a remarkable experience.
I can only imagine so much energy in one space.
Right.
But it sounds like also for you and your wife, how many years have you been together?
53 years.
Wow, amazing! Congratulations, how beautiful!
Yeah.
Yeah, how beautiful.
Well, and then we were in private practice together for about 40 years.
Wow.
So we shared an office, and it was ideal for us because we were like co-parenting too. We had a more equal distribution of effort at home, both in the home and in parenting, than most couples, because we would alternate being at home, so the kids never had to be in childcare. So we had a great life.
Yeah, I'm really moved by that. That sounds a beautiful way to do it. I think so many working parents now, they're just struggling to find that balance.
I've written a couple letters thinking that it seems to me that there should be job sharing for people who prioritize taking care of their kids. If all companies with 1,000 employees had to at least offer kind of a parental track so that they could share two jobs. If you don't care that much about getting ahead, and you just want to have a decent life and raise your kids, it's like job sharing to me is the way to do it.
No, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think I was giving a talk the other day, and I said at the end of it, rather controversially, but as soon as you become a parent, that's your job. Whatever was your job before is not your job anymore. That's what you do for money, the other thing. But your job is being a parent, and I think that's not aimed at anyone. It's societal, that society has made us feel that our jobs, we are too closely attached, to our work for self-worth, for the cost of living. Right. Now it's crazy. So, but thank you for sharing. I really resonate. And before the boys home, then just where did you grow up, and what was it like in your family?
It's pretty unremarkable in a lot of ways. Both of my parents were, the good thing about them was that they were both physically affectionate. And so I'm physically affectionate too, kind of a physical person. But they were both kind of narcissistic. And, so I wound up not feeling that close to them. And probably most therapists wind up having issues that drive them into the field of psychology. And then you spend some of your early years as a therapist kind of healing yourself by doing, extra work, therapeutic work. So I've done a lot of different kinds of therapy, from psychodrama to Gestalt to interactive group therapy and all kinds of things like that. So you want to be as healed as possible before you actually see people.
Yeah, I really hear that. I think we speak to a lot of psychologists, psychotherapists, psychiatrists and stuff on this podcast, and then also the specialist directory that we've built on Seen and Heard. I interview all the people that are on there before, so I get a really lovely experience of what brought people into the profession, into a healing profession, a helping profession, what their own motivations were, and I always love to ask, when you were, so thank you for sharing about your early years, physically affectionate parents, and that's helped you shape a good relationship with your body, with your physical self, but also hearing that not kind of narcissistic as well.
Right.
Yeah. And, when you were doing your work, don't have to go into it too much, but when you were doing your work to train, to unpack some of these things, what did you carried out into the world that you had to sort of work through, if you like, from that?
the thing that I've always probably dealt with is it's hard for me to let people do things for me, and that doesn't affect my therapeutic work with other people. But it's having parents that gave so reluctantly, so I kind of feel pretty independent and have a hard time letting people do things for me. Like
Mm.
me, so I take care of myself.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I can resonate with that a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of our podcasts are around the uh, experience of young people who maybe were sent off to boarding school at quite a young age, or maybe they came through the state care system, and independence was absolutely the only thing that was promoted. Whereas we know as a human species we are interdependent. It's our connections, our attachments that really matter to each other, to ourselves, to the world around us. But yeah, a lot of these kind of upbringings, we say, where it was hard to get your needs met, you had to fight to get your needs met, or I grew up in a boarding school where my needs were secondary to the needs of the institution. You learn to kind of take what you can get and hold on tight.
And I'm afraid to say that that's one of the limitations of my program. Is like there are several things that interfere with it being as effective as it can be. But one of the limitations is that it doesn't make up for neglect. And long-term neglect, it's like when people are raised in families where there's extreme neglect, some of what happens is that it interferes with your memory of your childhood. And if you see people who don't remember their childhood at all, what happens is like with that lack of stimulus, with the extreme neglect, their memory of their childhood turns into a kind of a gray void. And Serum doesn't help with that. It's like, the best advice I give to people like that is to learn to be in a loving relationship, because you need long-term loving experience to integrate that part of yourself. So the thing that Serum can help the most with is people who've had that boarding school experience and have experienced active trauma. It's like whether it's physical abuse or sexual abuse, or even some kind of verbal abuse, then Serum will help dramatically with that.
Mm. Thank you. So there's three things in there I want to unpack a little bit. We'll get to Serum and efficacy and etc. You raised something really important though, which is neglect. And I've heard it said that neglect in many ways is sort of can be more damaging, more insidious than isolating experiences of abuse. That's not to diminish that abuse is harmful and it should not be happening. There's something about that inescapable compound effect of not having your needs met that really does a number on the psyche. Could you talk to that a little bit?
You think about the message of being neglected. The main message is that you're not important. And how do you get over getting that message day after day after day? It becomes like just part of how you feel about yourself. It's really hard to change that.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, in my own healing journey, I think the neglect, I dealt with traumatic incidents, which, as you said, I have one of those grayscale memories. I was emotionally neglected from birth, and then had some traumatic incidents, growing up at school, boarding school, and other places, and actually, and then my teens. When I did emotional freedom technique with matrix re-imprinting, which is to go, release the energy from the body, go back to the memories, help reparent your younger self through them, and literally bring that soul part, that younger part home. Very, very powerful for me. I got through those relatively quickly. What's hung around is that sense of self-worth,
Mm-hmm.
advocating for my needs with
Mm-hmm.
my partner, with the world around me, and having healthy boundaries. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't put those, I mean, some of them slightly down to sort of traumatic instance, but mainly they were the neglect. Yeah.
It reminds me of a couple clients who, after doing the program, they told me that in the program was the very first time in their whole lives that they have felt self-love. They didn't actually know what it felt like until they did the program, which is kind of remarkable.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. I think I did talk therapy for sort of 20 years, and it was what I needed at the time. It was what I was ready for at the time. I wasn't ready for some of the stuff I've done in the last 5 years since my breakdown. But we'll come on to Serum because I've, as part of preparation for this podcast, I've used it. You very kindly sent it to me, and yeah, I had a remarkable experience with it. So we'll come on to that. But thank you for talking about neglect, because so often when people come to See and Heard for support, or they come to my one-to-one coaching practice, uh, they very much diminish their experience because they didn't have that big flagship abuse, or they say, "Oh, I was just bullied. I was just underfed. I was just unable to sleep at night for sleep deprivation, etc." And that's where we stop the conversation. Said, well, we've got to feel that, because there's no just about it. There's no sort of trauma top trumps or ranking table. It doesn't work like that, because it's not what happens to you, it's what you make it mean. So if your sister got an ice cream and you didn't get an ice cream, and on that day you made it mean that you are less than, and you are unlovable, and you are a bad boy, and you carry that for the rest of your life, that one incident with the ice cream could be as traumatic as someone else's abuse moment. It's remarkable. Could you speak to that at all in your experience?
Well, while you were talking about your own therapy experience, it came to me that you think about what the traditional therapy is like and why it works. For the client, it's like being listened to, and in the act of being listened to, the message is you are important. And it's like when you think about years of childhood neglect, so often it's like you have a parent that's not interested in what your thoughts are or what your feelings are. And it's like, so once again, the message is you're not important. So sometimes talk therapy takes a long time, because you are, in essence, you're being reparented, by somebody who cares. If you have a good therapist, they're a good listener, and so it's a validating experience to be listened to.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was very much my experience. Feeling I needed to find someone who'd walked the path.
Yeah.
I realized when I connected to my coach Piers Cross, he had been through similar experiences.
Mm-hmm.
He had had a difficult life. He'd been through addiction. He'd sort of fought his way through. And so for me, everyone's different, but for me, I saw he'd walked the path, and I could sort of really get on board with that. And I also knew I could say anything and I couldn't shock him.
It brings up a different kind of an alternate point to me, because one of the shocking things to me in experimenting with this program, because the first 10 years I was basically experimenting with whether or not it would work. One of the things that shocked me was I had always thought that part of the therapy recovery had to do with the empathy that a therapist would have for the client. And that kind of healing emotional experience was a part of what helped people recover. The odd thing about this program is that people do better work by themselves than they do with a therapist. And part of the reason for that is that when you think about doing this really deep emotional work in a therapy office, people might cry for between 5 and 15 minutes at the most. And there's a certain amount of self-consciousness. And people reported to me that when they did the program, they would cry through the whole hour. And one woman wrote to me and said that the program allowed her to ugly cry, which I thought was a great phrase because, oh, it's something that you're reluctant to do in front of anybody. And so, that's some of why it works. And the other reason that it works is that you have the freedom to do 2 sessions in a row, or a session every day, or have a session and then rest for a week and then do 5 sessions. The woman who probably holds the record for doing it the most did 17 sessions in 2 weeks. This was a young woman. She was a beautiful young woman, about 25 years old, who in the course of 3 years lost all of her family members to suicide. First it was her mother, and then a year later it was her stepfather, and a year after that it was her brother. That was her whole family. And she came to see me after about a year of trying to fight off those feelings herself, and she was probably going to follow in their footsteps. So she was depressed and kind of lifeless. And she did Serum 17 times in 2 weeks, and she saw me maybe 1 or 2 more times, and she didn't need any more therapy after that. She was like totally, she had processed all of that grief in that amount of time.
Mm.
So it's like the thing that shocked me is that with this program, you don't absolutely have to do it with a therapist. You can do so much significant work just by yourself. And when you think about the cost of therapy, like, the average EMDR therapist is charging $200 plus per session and seeing people 8 to 14 times. And so for most people, they can't afford that kind of therapy. Yeah. And people have written to me and said that even after years of therapy, after doing my program, they did more work and it worked better than after years of therapy. So it really has the potential of really changing mental health delivery all across the world.
Mm. No, thank you, David. Thank you. Yeah, it comes to me that so for my healing journey, what I practiced was emotional freedom techniques, so tapping, EFT. I was able to do that between sessions, and my main breakthroughs, I had probably 3 or 4 big breakthroughs in session with my coach, and then probably another 10, 15 breakthroughs were usually at 4 a.m. Yeah. I'd woken up, I was meditating myself back to sleep, I was tapping and breathing at the same time. I would hit something huge, and I could feel my whole body, I'd lose a layer of skin, basically. A whole piece moved in one go. And actually, for me, I was doing group stuff, so healing that relational trauma in relationship in group, and I was doing one-to-one work, and I was doing my own work on the side. And that trio, along with the body stuff, yoga, meditation, etc.
You actually change the chemistry of your brain when you do that. You do. Yeah.
It was like a super highway to healing. The multiplier effect. Mm-hmm. All of those different elements was like it was rocket fuel. So thank you for sharing that. So let's talk more about Serum. And in the intro, I talked about its sort of self-administered version in some way, using some of the base of kind of EMDR, which many people have heard of, and you just referenced there, which is really, very much seen as a gold standard for things like PTSD, etc. Mm. So can you talk to me about how you started the program, and where did the idea come from, and how did you develop it?
Well, I'd been a therapist for 30 years, so I had all this other experiences with all of these other therapies. And then when I think in my 50s, when I discovered EMDR, I was very skeptical at first. I thought it was very gimmicky. I didn't think it could possibly work. And I went to an early training and discovered, oh my gosh, it does work remarkably. But I wasn't, and then I did the advanced training. But the thing that I was unhappy about is that they continued to do the eye movement as opposed to using audio sound to cross the brain barrier, the hemispheres of the brain. And this eye movement, I think, is very tedious. It's very wearisome. It's hard to do. And, so I experimented using music with a particular mechanism that that alternated the sound. And eventually I thought, well, I'm going to let people take that home and do their own work and experiment with doing it on their own. And they did so well doing their own work. I thought, well, I should make a program that actually helps them do this kind of work and also incorporate some of the elements of all these other therapies that I knew how to do, whether it was Gestalt or hypnosis and all of that. So, the first part of it was experimental. It's like, how is this going to work? I was a little fearful of, is it going to be too powerful for people to do at home? It's been like 11 years and there have been no problems. And I get letters from all over the world telling me how helpful it has been to them. So I'm really pleased, with how it's worked. A little while ago, you were talking about like all the brain work, and there's a brain researcher that has called REM brain activity a dishwasher for the brain. And so when a person goes to sleep at night, that's why you wake, if you had an emotional experience and you go to bed, you wake up and you feel a little bit more resolved about it. And so it's that REM brain activity that clears the brain. She actually talks about how it clears the toxic chemicals in your brain and how essential it is. And so this is the first time in history that people can have an REM brain state and be awake. You think about the function of nightmares. Nightmares are the brain's attempt to resolve those situations. Every time a person is having a nightmare, they're discharging a little bit of that traumatic emotion. But it takes years to accomplish that because the brain is unconscious. And so it's not very directive at being able to do that. So it takes eventually the nightmares go away because you've done enough work. So when you do that same work when you're awake, you can get rid of the nightmares in a very short amount of time. You can clear those traumatic emotions in 1 or 2 sessions. Most people need 2 sessions, and then they're pretty much done.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. So, a little, not going too far down the neuroscience wormhole because it is a bottomless pit. But you mentioned 2 hemispheres of the brain. You mentioned EMDR, which for anyone who hasn't heard of it, who doesn't know about it, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, as David was referencing. You often follow, if it's online, you might follow a light around a screen.
Right.
I think in the early days they used touch as well, didn't they? Sort of different sides. Right. Could you explain this idea that why does having stimulus left to right or around the screen or sound help you to process difficult memories?
I think that they're still studying that. They'll be researching that for years to come. But I think that the main reason is that it's the only time that the whole brain is communicating with itself. When they do like the mental imaging, it's like, and you're in an REM state, it's like your whole brain is lit up. And most of the time, it's only a couple parts of your brain that are working. So this like enhances the communication with the brain. The other thing that happens with trauma, of almost all kinds of trauma, is obsessive thoughts. And when you think about anybody who's had any traumatic experience, not only can they relive it in flashbacks, but you wind up thinking about it over and over and over again. And sometimes that begins to feel like you're punishing yourself because you can't stop thinking about it. But that's the brain trying to resolve it. You see what I mean? It's like the brain is trying to get rid of those emotions, and it only gets rid of it a little tiny bit at a time. But when a brain is in REM state, you can think about those same thoughts, even if there's no visual component to the trauma. One of the alternate ways to use Serum is to ignore all of the guided imagery and just listen to the classical music as you're going for a walk, and to think about all of the things that you have troubled with, and what you'll realize is it's a very gentle experience compared to sitting and visualizing trauma. But if you go out for a walk and you're trying to get rid of these obsessive thoughts, when you're done, the obsessive thoughts will go away. So some of what's important for people to realize is that when you're having obsessive thoughts, or even when you're having nightmares, this is not your brain turning on you or being your enemy. Your brain is actually trying to heal. You're trying to, whether it's the nightmares or whether it's obsessive thoughts, each time you're having those things, the brain is trying to discharge some of the traumatic emotion. And the problem is that the brain is not efficient at doing that. But when it's in an REM state, the brain is 10 times more effective at resolving those traumas. It's like the processing goes so much deeper that you can resolve it in 1 or 2 sessions of REM therapy.
Thank you so much. That's fascinating. So obviously there's a lot going on in the trauma world, but also now crossing over into sort of mainstream news and things about the use of, for instance, psychedelics in therapy, and often what is, let's say, psilocybin as an example, what is often supported in the evidence that they put forward on that is this idea of getting more brain centers firing, is to get everything talking, to sort of blow through the barriers, if you like, that are in there that compartmentalize our thinking into sort of very left brain rational thinking. It opens up the creative side, etc. So, but what obviously you've got to go through what could be quite a difficult process. It's not legal. It's not for everybody. In some parts of the world, it's not for everybody, etc. But what you've created is doing a similar thing, is it? But in a safer environment.
It is safer. And, I believe in psychedelics, and I think that they can be growth experiences for people. I did psychedelics when I was in college, and they were growth experiences. And I think that they're a positive kind of awakening for people. It's really expensive to do that with a therapist, and it's a little dangerous to do it without a therapist. And there's always more of a chance of having a really bad experience. The nice thing about Serum is that if it's too powerful, you can stop it. I had one man who could only do it 5 minutes at a time, and he had so much emotion he had to stop after 5 minutes. It took him months to be able to do the whole program, but eventually, when he was able to do the whole program, it saved his life. He as a boy, he witnessed the murder of his older brother, and it was just a terrible trauma for him.
Thank you for sharing. Bless that man for keeping going with it, and that's incredible. Very, very powerful. So we've heard a little bit about how it works. It sort of gets the brain talking, both sides of the brain hemispheres talking to each other. Does it with sound, and I've experienced it myself. It is very easy to live with. It's not particularly intrusive. You kind of forget it's happening after a while.
That's perfect. That's a perfect way of describing it. And that's one of the reasons I chose classical music, because my own experience with classical music is I almost always wind up being lost in my own thoughts, as opposed to like more popular music or music that's like more engaging. And it's like classical music somehow puts you into your own head. And so that's the whole goal, is to pay less attention to the music and more attention to what's happening inside your own brain.
Thank you. So we've sort of touched around it a little bit, but for those who are listening, just so it's super clear, what have you, how does it look like if someone wants to interact with it? And what are they going to experience when they download the audio?
Well, the most important thing is to use earbuds. It's like for those people who have written and said, okay, well, they couldn't get it to work. And then I find out that they just listen to it on a stereo, even in their car. It's like, no, you have to be in a very quiet and safe place. You have to feel like you're completely vulnerable. So you need to use earbuds or earphones so that the sound can go back and forth between your ears. And then you need to have a mindset of letting whatever feelings come up. There's a natural kind of internal conflict between allowing strong emotions to come up. And, that's some of what happens to people who are depressed, is that they've suppressed their hurt for so long and then they're afraid that if it comes up, that it may never go away. So there's a natural inclination to keep it buried. So you have to, as much as possible, have a feeling of like, I'm going to let myself feel whatever I'm going to feel, whether it's anger or sadness or grief or whatever you might feel.
Thank you, David. I think that's so important when I work with clients, particularly when we're doing trauma stuff together. In EFT, use the statement, even though, insert statement here, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And what you're doing is you're giving permission and space to feel this, to talk about this thing, to know it's present in your body. I found that very empowering, because 90% of the time, particularly here with our British stiff upper lip, kind of keep calm and carry on mentality, we just push everything away as being inconvenient. Right. And when you said about the ugly crying, I just thought, such a good way of putting it, because I know people very close to me who say, oh no, I hate crying, I go all blotchy, I get ugly, or it gives me a headache. And so they very early in life, they've put crying into shadow, they've put grief into shadow. Right. It's not welcome in their caregivers or where they grew up, and so it's been put away.
Yeah, it's another way of receiving a message of your feelings aren't important. The other thing that happens for some people is that they're unable to identify what it is that's making them anxious. Of all the people I saw, one of the most dramatic cases I ever saw was a man who was an accomplished businessman, and he had no idea why he was anxious. He started having panic attacks, and they got worse and worse and worse, to the point where he was having 10 full-blown panic attacks a day. He had no idea why. He was applying for permanent disability because he could no longer do his job. He had no idea why he was anxious. And I think about trying to describe how anxious he was. I saw a video on Facebook of a woman who was about to do a bungee jump, and she was standing there frozen, like the panic on her face. That man sat on the edge of his chair, and that's the kind of anxiety that he had in my office. It seemed like he could break down at any moment. He came back 2 weeks later, having done Serum multiple times, and I didn't recognize him. He looked like a totally different person. He's like, and he had no idea even really what he had worked on, but it's like it had changed his brain. And so that was one of the more dramatic cases.
Wonderful.
Interesting.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Really powerful. So there was something that came through, which is, you said yourself in the website when I was looking at it and things that, it's not for neglect. And I also picked up, and correct me if this is wrong, things like depression, addiction, brain injury, etc. So what does Serum really do well, and what is the efficacy less on?
It works the best on identifiable trauma, where you have like the simplest things are like one event trauma, but then there are people who have had like a lifetime of trauma. I had a woman who was raised with parents who only had one parenting technique. They only had one parenting skill, and that was physical punishment. So she was physically punished almost every day of her life. I mean, whipped. and because her trauma was so specific, she could visualize that over and over and over again, and eventually she got to be fine. It was no longer an impact in her life, but she was one of the most abused people I've ever known.
Very sad. But
there's another person who was the exact opposite of that. He was a fireman, and he was the victim of a home invasion. And as he was struggling with this guy, he realized that this was a fight to the death, that there was this guy was going to kill him or he was going to kill the guy. And so he wound up killing him. And he came to see me the day after, and you can imagine the kind of shock he was in. And so that's like a trauma that just like a one event, and he was able to get over that with just like 2 uses of the Serum program, and he was fine. But it's so active traumas, it works the best on. Long-term neglect is probably something that it doesn't work on.
I think that's really strong to admit where it has its use and where it doesn't. I think what in how I was coached and what I practice, we identify with the client with the big trees, the big T traumas, the big trees in the forest.
Oh, right.
And we take them down early because there is a root network, just like there is in the forest. There's a root network between those traumas. And so then usually what happens is when the trauma has been there in someone's life, the law of attraction means it's going to keep showing up for you in some way or another throughout your life. So if you have a trauma, you make it mean that you are worthless, then that feeling of worthlessness, that belief, will mean that you attract more abuse into your life because of that worthlessness in a normal way. So we take out the big trees, and this just sounds like a great tool for knocking out those big trees, those identifiable.
Right. One of the things that this brings to mind is something I should mention, though, and that is that early research on EMDR showed that when you do EMDR work and you work on trauma that's happened later in your life, it will not affect the amount of trauma that you still have from your earlier in your life. But the opposite is true, is if you work on trauma that happened earlier in your life, the later trauma in your life is automatically reduced.
Yeah.
So the earlier you want to work on things, the more helpful it is.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, David. It's I was thinking about a client I worked with this week where we go to an adult trauma because it's easier to access, it's fresher in the memory, etc. And then what we do with matrix reimprinting is we ask that younger part that might only be 5 years younger as an adult. We ask that part, take us to the first time that this happened. Take us to the first time you remember feeling worthless, and we go echo to echo, memory to memory. So what happens is the subconscious, that younger self as an adult, will take you super highway to a 4-year-old or a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old. You resolve it there, all the rest go like dominoes. The network falls around it. It is remarkable.
I think that you're kind of alluding also to the idea that really it's a powerful therapy technique to examine and work on your relationship that you have with yourself. It's like, how do you feel about yourself? Do you love yourself? Can you take care of yourself? That's some of what the program does too. It's like, one of the more famous Gestalt techniques is that empty chair work, where a person actually talks to themselves. And that's what I have in the program. That's probably the most emotional part for people, is when they are actually asked to love themselves and embrace themselves and treat themselves like a child,
It's a beautiful thing, that. Yeah. It brings back a lot of the work I've done. And it's something I do every day in meditation, is I step into my inner world and I hug my inner children that I've brought home. I just go in and look after them every day, as the loving parent. As well, I use archetypal. So as I go in as the king, warrior, magician, lover, but I go in as the king and love these parts. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So how does we get a lot of people listening to this who will be professionals, maybe counselors, therapists, psychologists, etc. And I can definitely think of a few eyebrows about, doing deep trauma personal work on your own without a professional around. How do you speak to that?
Well, once again, people do better work on their own than they do with a therapist. And then what happens is that they can come in and process the experience with the therapist, talk about, well, what did they learn? What was it like for them? And then, after you've done that therapy work, you still wind up wanting to examine your current life and kind of rebuild, well, what do you want your life to look like? So it just makes work easier after a person has done this kind of trauma work. That early trauma and holding on to those emotions interferes with the progress that people can make in their current life. So like once they resolve that, then with the therapist and with a coach, they can move on much more easily. So for therapists who want to make, who prioritize making quick progress with their clients and helping them as quickly as they can to help them resolve their suffering, then the program works. And there's therapists all over the world. There's a therapist in India who wrote to me and said that he found the program astonishingly therapeutic. And I was like, okay, I appreciate that.
That's beautiful. I can really hear it. I mean, working as a coach, but actually just from my own healing journey, I would take, so what we often say at Seen and Heard, we have free online sharing groups for people who've had similar experiences. They come together and share. And what we say is that fits really well alongside a one-to-one therapeutic relationship, because stuff's getting heard and seen and unpacked in group that goes back to one-to-one, and then it can be worked out more, or something from one-to-one ends up coming into group, and it helps others and it helps them. And so there is that symbiotic relationship. And what you're saying here is this sits really nicely alongside other helping relationship.
Yep. You can help a lot of people.
Beautiful. So how is it, I think Mike got this wrong, but 11 years, is that about right? Since you looked at it?
Right.
Okay. What's been its trajectory? How's it been received?
Well, it's in 36 countries right now. So that's a lot. I mean, I have a list of all the countries because it's kind of fun for me to see what countries it's, and if I have a new country on the list, that's always a thrill. So yeah, I'm, and the feedback that I get is almost always positive. And if you look on Trustpilot, it's like, and it actually sold on Amazon. It's like all of the reviews are positive. And so that's always satisfying to me. I don't make a profit with it. I actually offer it as a public service. I'm retired and I'm comfortable, and so I even want it to go on after I'm no longer alive. I want it to survive, and so I'm going to leave some funds so that maybe it could be free for a while afterwards. Just because it's so effective. It's just I didn't want it to disappear. Well,
thank you for your work to bring it forward, and hearing that it's a gift. I was once heard that emotional freedom technique. It's sort of therapy for the masses, free of charge. You can self-administer it. You can support others with it. You just tap along together. You can teach a 4-year-old child. You can teach a 90-year-old person who's got dementia. You work with people who are autistic. It just tap. But this is similar in that it has that lovely broad appeal, and you can for what is the pricing? So if someone wants to go and find this and have a go, how do they learn how to do it safely? How do they find it? And
it downloads for $19, and then if anyone has any questions, I provide free consultation to anyone who uses it all over the world. So it's as reasonable as I can make it right now.
Very much so. Thank you. And as a user of it, you've inspired me to get it back out again. I used it twice when I first heard about it.
Uh-huh.
and had a very powerful experience processing something, funnily enough, around a psychedelic experience. So I had a very bad trip when I was 16 on LSD, and I worked it through using your tool, and very, very, very powerful. I'd done some work on it already with my coach, but it was very good.
One of the things that brings to my mind is that, people can begin the program and have a specific idea of what it is they want to work on, or they can sit back and let their brain decide. You can almost kind of become an observer of your own thoughts, and eventually people often find things that they didn't know were buried in their brain, and they have a tremendous amount of emotion and they didn't even know it was there, and they wind up working through it, and then they feel so relieved afterwards. So you can do it both ways.
Yeah, brilliant, wonderful. So what's your sort of top tips for people then, if they like the sound of this? They will put the website link in the show notes for today, so you'll be able to find David's website and where to download. You said it's on Amazon, other places, so we'll put those links in there. But someone might be feeling a little bit nervous about opening this Pandora's box on their own with some headphones on. What would you say to them?
Well, I say the same thing to them that I say to people who've done the program and they're afraid to do again because they had such a strong response. And that is, use Serum the second way. If you have a lot of anxiety about the amount of emotion that comes up, go ahead and just walk with it. It's a much less emotional way to use the program. It helps the brain think through things in a cognitive way as opposed to emotional way, and use it that way first. And then if you do it in an emotional way and it feels like too much, you can stop the program at any time. It's like if you use it for 5 minutes and it's like, okay, well, just come back to it when you're feeling like you have the strength to do it. All you need is the willingness to comfort yourself if you're going to get emotional. Don't be self-blaming. Just be patient and loving of yourself as you're doing the program. At the end of the program, it has so much to do with loving yourself and being enthusiastic. I had one woman who came to me who told me she was like determined to commit suicide. I mean, she had a date that she was going to do it. She had a method. And she said, I'm only seeing you because I think I should, but I'm really not thinking that this is going to help. And I want my life to be over. And she did the Serum program, and she came back and she was starting her own business. And she had cards printed out to start her own business, and she was enthusiastic about her life. It's like anybody with suicidal ideation should definitely do the program. And that was some of my initial kind of motivation to do it to begin with, is that there were so many VA veterans suicides. I said, this has got to help more people. They can't afford to see a therapist, and there's 50 veterans a day that were committing suicide, and it's like this has got to stop. We got to help these people. Mm-hmm. So, and there's so much untreated trauma all over the world. It's like people, that's a part of the human condition, is to have trauma. And it's like, not everyone can afford to see $150 an hour therapist.
No. And, even if they can, doing this alongside,
right.
Like I say, you're going to get that multiplier effect in those $150 sessions.
Right.
It's like you don't just, if you see a personal trainer once a week, that's not the only training you do, I hope.
Right.
You've got to put a shift in every day. You've got to show up, and so this feels like a tool to enable people to do that. So, yeah, bless you for your work, David. It's great work. Is there anything, as we start to bring things to an end, our time's short today, is there anything we haven't touched on that you'd like to let people know?
Well, the thought about doing it every day reminded me that there are some people who aren't full of trauma, but they have chronic illnesses and like fibromyalgia, and they have reported to me that they use it every day in order to start their day. It's kind of like the meditation, and it just puts them in a more relaxed state, and so they have much less need for medication because they feel so much better when they use it every day.
Beautiful. Okay, well, yeah, I really hear that. So, to wrap things up, Seen and Heard, we're all about giving people opportunities to heal. Then we have a funding support program to help people speak to specialists. Got a specialist directory. We have the free online group, sharing groups, etc. But this feels like another tool in that locker.
Sure.
So we'll make sure that we have it available and let people know about it. As you said, there is too much trauma in the world, and I did a podcast the other day with Ben Perks, who's just written a brilliant book called Trauma Proof. And in that, he says, he puts the mission out there that, previous generations, they brought us antibiotics, they brought us the Industrial Revolution, they brought us, surgical advances, hand washing, all sorts of things. Our generation's gift, our responsibility, is to become trauma informed and to heal from our trauma and to stop, break the cycle. That's our generation's gift. So your contribution to that has been wonderful. Not only your 30 years working with people, but in bringing Serum to the world. So thank you for your work, David.
Thank you for being interested enough to have me on. I really appreciate being interviewed. Thanks.
No, that's cool. For everyone out there, thank you so much for listening. We've been with David Busch. We've been talking about Serum, which is SE-REM, like the rapid eye movement REM. So big S, small e, hyphen REM in capitals. It'll be in the show notes where you can find it. And just if you're going down this path, look after yourselves, build those support networks, have those groups, have the one-to-one stuff as well. This is a wonderful tool that can help you on your journey. So have a good one, and we'll say goodbye to David today. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you at the next podcast. And this has been the Seen and Heard podcast, a conversational series, and look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.